The days of always being able to simply remove the factory head unit and swap to an aftermarket model for the source of your aftermarket car audio system are unfortunately running out. In today's newest vehicles, the manufacturer is virtually always integrating features like climate controls and vehicle system controls into the stock factory head unit. Now, some car audio companies are making solutions that allow for the retention of these features even with an aftermarket head unit. But with so many new vehicles on the market, a solution like this doesn't always exist. Now, we can still use the factory system as a source in order to send signal to our aftermarket amplifiers. But with these newer vehicles, there are some potential issues with doing so that we want to be aware of. Whenever we are using the factory system as a source to send signal to our aftermarket system, we refer to this as factory system integration. Hey everyone, I'm Mark. Welcome to CarAudioFabrication. Here on this channel, we learn how to master car audio and how to design, build, and install our dream car audio system. In this video, we're discussing the latest common issues with factory system integration and their solutions. Now, really quick, before we get into it, a thank you to our sponsor for this episode, Crutchfield. On Crutchfield's website, you can enter the year, make, and model of your vehicle and determine exactly what speakers fit and what aftermarket head unit options there are. In those cases where we can't swap the head unit, they also oftentimes offer solutions for some of the issues that we're going to talk about in this video. I've personally used Crutchfield to find car audio gear for a long time, long before I actually even started the YouTube channel. I've always had a great experience with their customer service and website, and I think that you will too. To learn more and save on your next car audio purchase, be sure to check out the link down in the video description. All right, let's get into it. Common issues with factory system integration. And I want to get this out of the way up front first. We're not talking about the normal, simple installation issues that you're going to have when you're using a factory system as the source. We've talked about these issues many times before on the channel, and I'll just go over them really briefly. That would be bandwidth limited channels. So if you don't have a full range of frequencies, that's common when you're using the factory system as a source. You want to obviously avoid that if you're looking to add full range speakers. Oftentimes, a factory system will also already have equalization applied. In other words, different frequencies are going to be boosted and other ones are going to be cut. And a lot of times when we're integrating with a factory system, we kind of want to undo that factory EQ and get everything back to electrically flat so that we can then tune the acoustic response later. The third more basic issue that we've covered several times in the past is a lot of times there is factory time delay on some of the different speaker locations. Sometimes you need to undo that or plan on using that delay. These are all very basic topics that we're not really discussing in this video, but you can check out the other videos in the past that I've done on these topics. So with that out of the way, the first more common advanced issue that we have with the latest vehicles in today's day and age is ANC mics. ANC stands for active noise cancellation. Basically, what the vehicle manufacturers are doing is they have microphones at different spots within the vehicle, and those microphones are listening for road noise and other noise that you potentially wouldn't want inside the cabin. And what those microphones do is whatever noise they detect, they actually play that noise in reverse phase, so out of phase, through the speakers in your system, and it actually cancels out the noise in that environment. Now, this sounds like a great thing, right? Wouldn't you want it to be less noisy in the vehicle? Well, of course, but what you have to consider here is that that factory ANC system is tuned based upon the factory stereo system in the vehicle. What can unfortunately happen is when you start swapping out components, even replacing just speakers or adding something like a subwoofer, that ANC system can detect that change in the way the system is playing as noise, and it attempts to undo that noise, which oftentimes just results in some really odd sounding noise. Oftentimes it can sound like a weird feedback or a humming. It just doesn't sound natural at all. So ANC mics are something that we usually want to try to disable when we're adding an aftermarket system. So how do we go about disabling them? Well, oftentimes we simply just need to disconnect them. And luckily for us, that ANC mic oftentimes will run to the factory amplifier or to the factory head unit. So we need to just determine on a wire schematic what wires actually go to those ANC mics so that we can disconnect them. The other thing that's awesome is we are starting to see wire harnesses that allow for this simple bypass and disconnect those wires for us. Now, the next modern day factory system integration challenge is fake exhaust noise. Now, I'm just speculating here, but I'd imagine that there are all sorts of rules and regulations on the vehicle manufacturers for how loud a stock exhaust can be. And the idea and mindset here is that they want the driver to still experience what it would sound like to have a nice, loud, throaty exhaust system. So they pipe that exhaust noise through the system of your vehicle, and you actually hear it playing through the speakers. Again, you may think, oh, that's a good thing, right? Why wouldn't I want that? But the issue becomes when you upgrade to an aftermarket system, sometimes the addition of those exhaust notes becomes amplified and becomes overbearing and far more obtrusive than what it was originally designed to be. Now, how can you detect if you do in fact have fake engine noise playing through the factory system? Well, what you can do is you can take an RTA or a real-time analyzer, you can connect to the speaker level outputs and measure the electrical signal, and you're not going to actually be playing any music or any signal through the system, and you're just going to rev the vehicle when it's turned on, of course, and you're going to see if you measure an electrical change in that response on the RTA. If you do see a change in that signal when you are revving the car, you know that you have some sort of exhaust noise being piped into the system. Now, unfortunately, in this case, that noise is kind of more baked into the software of the vehicle. So in order to get rid of it, what you have to do is oftentimes you have to either go to the dealer and ask really nicely and maybe pay an hourly rate to have them turn that off in software and reflash it so that it doesn't have that issue. Or for some vehicles, there are less expensive aftermarket solutions that you can purchase that connect to the OBD2 port and allow you to turn off that bit of data on your own. This is something that changes wildly from vehicle to vehicle, so unfortunately, if you do detect that issue and it's something that you want to change, it's something you're going to have to research. I'd recommend checking out different Facebook groups focused on that model of vehicle, or if there's also a dedicated forum, searching that for that vehicle. Now, for the next challenge that we're going to talk about, I want to actually lump two different challenges into one because they kind of have the same solution. And those challenges that can get in the way of modern factory system integration are all-pass filters and upmixers. Now, disclaimer, I'm going to use very basic layman's terms here in order to describe these to help break it down. First off, an upmixer basically takes a normal left-right stereo signal and it expands it into a multi-channel signal. This can be used to create more of an ambiance or a surround sound type experience in a vehicle, or it can even be used for something as simple as adding a center channel speaker. A great example to discuss would be a center channel upmixer. Imagine, if you will, when you normally have two speakers, a left and a right, in order to create a stereo image, what the sound recording engineer would do is anything they want you to hear in the middle, they would just have play on both the left and right channel. That way you're going to hear that phantom center image. Now again, very basic terms here, but what we could have a center channel upmixer do is we could code it to say that anytime you see a sound that occurs on both the left and right channels, I want you to no longer play it on the left and right channels. Instead, I want you to play that sound on only the new center channel. As you can imagine, this can get much, much more complex in today's latest vehicles that may have many, many speaker locations and far more advanced upmixing technology. Now, in this case, the upmixer isn't something that's necessarily bad or something that we want to defeat. It's something that we could actually use to our advantage if we like the way that the factory system's upmixer sounds. Many times a solution for a system like this is to go channel for channel, basically retaining the same number of speakers and channels as the factory system for the new aftermarket system. There are other solutions though. If we'd like to avoid the upmixing, what we can generally do is we can use a device that essentially grabs the signal when it's in its more basic left-right format prior to the upmixing. Now, while we're still in this category, another thing that we want to pay attention to is the addition of all-pass filters on the factory signal. An all-pass filter is similar to high-pass filters and low-pass filters that you've likely heard of before, except rather than changing the amplitude at a certain frequency above or below that, it instead only changes the phase. In other words, to really break this down, if I was playing a full range signal and I applied an all-pass filter, you wouldn't hear any change in the frequency response. But if I played the same signal through two speakers and only applied an all-pass filter to one of those speakers, you would definitely hear a change in that combined sound. Now, the benefit of an all-pass filter, and the reason that vehicle manufacturers often include them in factory systems, is they can be used to make for a multi-seat tune. In other words, to have the sound performance be good in multiple different locations of the vehicle. So it's important to note that if we do use a factory signal that has an all-pass filter on it for our aftermarket system, and we start applying something like time delay, we can cause issues. Now, the solution for correcting all-pass filters is there are some devices on the market that will detect an all-pass filter and it will remove them, but what it's actually doing is just applying another all-pass filter to negate the use of that existing filter. I cover this in more detail with visual examples in the related video up in the corner of the screen, but much like an upmix signal, this is one of those things that might be beneficial to retain. You have to understand that manufacturers will oftentimes add those all-pass filters to the stock system for a reason. They don't just add them for the heck of it to make things harder for us. It's often added to solve an issue with the listening environment in that vehicle, and they can be, like I said, beneficial to retain. Now, yet another challenge with modern day factory system integration is what I would call monitored outputs. The issue here arises when we disconnect a factory speaker from the factory system and we use that signal to send to our aftermarket system, but we no longer have a speaker or a load on that connection. What can happen is the factory system can detect that there is no longer a speaker or load connected and actually switch off that output. The issue here is pretty clear. If we're using that signal for our aftermarket system and it gets switched off by the factory system, we no longer have signal for our aftermarket system. If we experience this challenge, there are devices that can go between the factory system and our aftermarket system in order to create or basically simulate a load existing, like that speaker is still connected so that the factory system doesn't know the difference and will still play the audio correctly. There we have it, the challenges that come with modern factory system integration. If you are new here, I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and don't forget that you can save on your next car audio purchase with the link down in the video description to our show sponsor, Crutchfield. A big thanks to them along with Jay and the rest of the Patreon membership team for making these videos possible, and thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching.